Was after the nation's Druze leader called on Israel, the Jews around the world, and the international community to act now.
Hello and welcome to MEELive. Join us as today we take another look at the headlines shaping our world.
We are broadcasting live to YouTube from Middle East Eye's headquarters here in London.
I'm Mohammed Hassan.
And I'm Matilda Mallinson. Today is Thursday, the 1st of May. We've got a lot lined up. After the headlines, Mohammed, you are taking on the deep dive. What's coming up?
Well, we're going straight to The Hague, where our reporter Sundus Aam is joining us just outside the International Court of Justice. There, this week, Israel has been defending its actions in Gaza, but in particular, its closure of the UN aid agency, UNRWA. You may have heard back in October, they decided to shut it down completely. They shut down its offices, preventing it from being able to access Gaza and deliver vital aid. That aid has come to a complete halt for the last 2 months. And the repercussions of that, legally speaking, are now being tested in front of the World Court.
Well, after that, our spotlight is going to be looking at Kashmir. You're probably aware that there was a deadly attack in the contested region just on Saturday. Since then, tensions have escalated between neighbouring India and Pakistan. But it's not the first time that there have been tensions like this. So we will be speaking to a journalist in Kashmir to find out if anything is different this time, if this is just another war of words, or if the threat of conflict is real.
I'm looking forward to that. First up, let's take a look at today's headlines. Israel has carried out drone strikes near Syria's capital hours after a controversial Druze leader pressed the government to act in the interests of the religious minority. Violence erupted in Syria's predominantly Druze towns of Jaramana and Sahnaya earlier this week between members of the Druze community and Sunni Muslim gunmen, killing more than a dozen people. As footage of the attacks spread, Israel's government intervened on Wednesday, launching aerial strikes outside of Damascus, saying it was targeting an extremist group. But the attack only seemed to escalate the violence. This morning, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported 15 Druze fighters were killed in an ambush by Sunni groups near the capital, bringing the death toll to over 30. The violence was reportedly sparked by a recording that showed a Druze man cursing the Prophet Muhammad, but this, Druze leaders have insisted, was fabricated to sow division among the people of the same nation. Meanwhile, Syria's foreign ministry rejected all forms of foreign intervention and reiterated its commitment to protecting all of its citizens.
While the airstrikes in Syria have been widely reported as Israel's warning against extremists, locals and experts in Syria have instead warned of a disguised attempt by Netanyahu's government to destabilize its Islamic neighbor. Israel's airstrikes on Syria came hours after the nation's Druze leader called on Israel, the Jews around the world, and the international community to act now, immediately, to prevent a massacre. Muwafaq Tarif maintains close ties with the Israeli government, who framed the strike that followed his words as a warning to prevent harm to the Druze. But Lebanese Druze leader Walid Jumblat, pictured here, warned Israel seeks to exploit the Druze to create internal strife in Syria. And in contrast to Israeli and foreign media reports linking Syria's sectarian attacks to its transitional government, Syria's Interior Ministry has called for calm and said it is investigating the origins of the recording that seemed to have provoked the racist violence. Meanwhile, the country's highest-ranking Islamic jurist, Grand Mufti Osama al-Rifai, condemned the spilling of any Syrian blood as haram or
إياكم وأن تسمعوا لأصوات الثأر والانتقام. دماؤكم محرمة. كل دم سوري محرم. قطرة دم واحدة من أي فرد من أفراد هذا البلد غالية على قلوبنا. لا ينبغي التفريط فيها بحال من الأحوال. أيها الإخوة الأحبة، إياكم أن تسمعوا لصوت الشيطان. صوت الشيطان هو الذي يدعو إلى الثأر والانتقام، وهو الذي يدعو إلى إشعال الفتنة وإذكائها فيما بيننا. ينبغي أن نتحد اليوم أمام هذه الفتنة التي يشعلها أعداء الله ورسوله وأعداء الأمة وأعداء الإنسانية وأعداء هذا الوطن.
The Druze are not a homogenous group, and the most powerful Druze militias in Syria have actually signed a security agreement with Damascus, working jointly with the government forces to end internal fighting. Middle East Eye spoke to Druze residents of Sana'a, where the worst attacks took place this week. They said Syrian security forces came with full respect and politeness.
لما دخلوا حدا أذاكم شيء، حدا حكى معكم شيء، شو الوضع حاليا؟ عندنا ناس خايفة هلا. الإخوة إجوا بكل احترام بكل أدب. نعم. قالوا للشباب طبعا المظاهر مسلحة ما بدهم، وما كان في مظاهر مسلحة موجودة هون. نعم. قالوا للشباب بس بعدوا عن المناطق المكروسة، لأنه كانوا عم يلاحقوا عصابات إرهابية هي اللي افتعلت المشكلة من امبارح. عصابات خارجة عن القانون، امبارح قتلوا 11 واحد أو 16 واحد من وزارة الداخلية. من وزارة الداخلية، ونحن كنا شفنا هذا الحديث امبارح، حتى شفناه متلفز، والله يكون معهم، ونحن شفناهم اليوم، ونحن اليوم مساعدين لهم، وقلنا لهم شو بتريدوا نحن جاهزين. نحن جاهزين أبدا. ولاقوا العالم بكل احترام وكل أدب، وما حكوا مع حدا ولا كلمة بتسيء لأي شخص. نعم. ونحن بمعية مشايخنا، طبعا احنا قدوتنا مشايخنا ملتزمين بكلامهم، نحن مستنيين هلا لحتى يعطونا امر انه المنطقه او الحارات صارت امنه لحتى ان شاء الله.
Israel has declared a national emergency after 2 days of wildfires just outside of Jerusalem. Thousands were forced to evacuate as fires erupted along the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway, with high temperatures and strong winds fueling the blaze. Israel has requested international assistance, with Greece, Croatia, Italy, and Cyprus deploying firefighting resources.
And finally, Ukraine's government has signed a controversial trade agreement granting the United States unfettered access to its rare earth minerals. This follows months of pressure from US President Donald Trump for Ukraine to repay more than $180 billion worth of military aid and training, which it received from the US since the start of Russia's invasion in 2022. Ukraine sits on a large reserve of graphite, titanium, and lithium, key materials sought by the US to fuel its military and technology sectors. Now stay tuned as we look at the ongoing hearings at the International Court of Justice, where Israel is defending its shutdown of UNRWA, the United Nations humanitarian agency in Palestine.
We now turn to The Hague, on the 4th day of hearings into Israel's shutdown and ban of UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The case has been brought forward by Norway, who accuses Israel of breaching international law by preventing vital humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza and repeatedly targeting aid groups like UNRWA. Back in October, Israel shut down the UN Relief Agency's offices and prevented it from operating in Gaza or the occupied Palestinian territories, and sparking international outrage. Despite providing vital humanitarian assistance for 5.9 million Palestinians, Israel says 12 of UNRWA's 13,000 staff in Gaza had taken part in the attacks on October 7th. So far, the World Court has heard statements from more than 20 countries, including the UK, France, Spain, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. All have urged Israel to comply with its legal obligations to Palestinians under its military occupation. Only 2 countries have spoken in its defense: Hungary and the United States. Yesterday, U.S. Department official Joshua Simmons addressed the court, arguing that Israel wasn't obligated to allow a third-party agency to operate inside Gaza.
Even if an organization offering relief is an impartial humanitarian organization, and even if it is a major actor, occupation law does not require an occupying power to allow and facilitate that specific actor's relief operations. An occupying power may also fulfill its humanitarian obligations toward the civilian population while advancing its own military and security interests.
Now, earlier this week, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar went even further. He said the hearings at the ICJ were not about justice, but weaponizing legal institutions to render Israel defenseless. Now, there is a lot riding on what happens at The Hague this week, because at the heart of this legal back and forth is a question about whether Israel can and will be held accountable for the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Tomorrow marks 2 months since Israel imposed a complete block on aid entering the besieged enclave, denying more than 2.3 million Palestinians basic food, fresh water, and vital medical supplies. More than 3,600 children were admitted to health facilities with acute malnutrition in April, a sharp increase on the month prior. This while airstrikes have intensified since Israel unilaterally broke a ceasefire with Hamas it had agreed to back in January. Speaking on Tuesday as part of the Palestinian delegation to The Hague, Irish barrister Blineni Harali told the court that the shutdown of UNRWA, coupled with the closure of the Rafah crossing as well as a maritime blockade, has completely cut off Gaza from the rest of the world.
Violation of the court's order to maintain open land crossing points, in particular the Rafah crossing, previously described by the UN High Commissioner as, quote, the symbolic lifeline for 2.3 million people in Gaza. Israel has closed all crossings, and it has turned Rafah itself, once a refuge for almost 1.5 million displaced Palestinians, into a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Now, to tell us more, we're joined now from outside of The Hague by MEE reporter Sundus Aam Sundus. Thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mohammed, for having me.
You have been sitting through all the hearings this week. You've been listening to all of the different delegations speaking. What has been the overarching message that you've heard?
Well, the resounding message that the majority of states here have pointed out since the beginning of the hearings on Monday is that Israel has a clear legal obligation to facilitate the entry of humanitarian relief into Gaza, and that the full ban on UNRWA, which the Israeli Knesset approved back in October, is in violation of Israel's international legal obligations. So far, 30 states have delivered oral interventions. Right now, as we speak, the United Kingdom is addressing the court. The majority of states, as you highlighted earlier, with the exception of the United States and Hungary, have disputed Israel's allegation that it has a discretion on its ability to facilitate or allow humanitarian relief into Gaza, including allowing the work of United Nations agencies like UNRWA, or even the work of third states. Now, this advisory opinion is very precise. It's basically based on a request from the General Assembly to the International Court of Justice to rule on a number of questions, basically pertaining to Israel's obligations under international law with regards to the presence and activities of United Nations agencies, international NGOs, as well as third states in relation to occupied Palestinian territories. Throughout this week, states have pointed out a number of legal arguments. First of all, there is an emphasis on the absolute immunity that UNRWA and other UN agencies enjoy under international law. And this is based on the 1946 Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of UN agencies, to which Israel is a party, and also in accordance with the UN Charter of 1945. States have argued that both the legal ban on UNRWA and any attacks on its facilities or personnel violates the 1946 Convention and is in clear violation of the United Nations Charter. But also there have been arguments with regards to Israel's obligations under international humanitarian law, which is the law governing armed conflicts, and in particular the Fourth Geneva Convention, which deals with the situations of occupation, or how civilians are treated under occupation, such as the situation in occupied Palestine right now.
And we
So
heard the US.
the argument is basically that the obligation of Israel towards the civilians under its occupation is not limited by any arguments related to military necessity or security. And that's exactly the argument that the US has been trying to advance during this week, and also Hungary, and of course Israel, that it has the right under international law to hinder or curtail the work of UN agencies, basically on the basis of securing its interests or its security.
Now, the hearing was ignited by a petition from Norway's government, and earlier today you spoke to Norway's Deputy Foreign Minister, Andreas Mosfeld Kravik. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Difficult to describe it. It's a living nightmare which is unfolding on the Gaza Strip. You have people living in tents. They have been forced to move not just one or two or three times, but multiple times. There's a lack of medicine, there's a lack of water, food supplies, there's a lack of everything that people need to survive. And in the middle of everything, you have hostilities being conducted. And the number of civilians having been killed or maimed is again unconscionable. So we have to do everything we can to make this stop. And we are operating and we're taking many initiatives. This is one of them, because we think it's important to get the normative issue clarified. So we want the ICJ to pronounce on the legal side of things. But then, of course, also we need to do more than that. So we are one of the biggest donors in terms of giving financial assistance to humanitarian organizations so that they can provide relief. But also we're working with other partners in order to realize the two-state solution. And we're in close contact not only with our European partners, but also our partners in the Middle East. And I think we stand together in working towards a two-state solution where you have a self-standing sovereign Palestinian state and, of course, an Israeli state with safe and recognized borders. So that's what we're trying to bring about, and this is one of many initiatives.
Now, Sundus, the legal case against Israel, we've seen many challenges come forward in several different arenas over the course of the last 18 months. A number of them have been at the UN, whether the General Assembly or the Security Council, where the United States has come in and used their veto power to try and shut down any kind of decisive action that takes place. And so you've seen instead some of these other countries, some of these smaller countries that have taken up the mantle in the international courts, whether the ICC or here at the ICJ. Norway is one of them. South Africa is another. Have these cases encouraged other countries to come forward as well?
Well, absolutely. The number of states participating in this week's proceedings is quite significant. It's not only states that are politically opposed to Israel, but we see states that are traditionally allied with Israel, like Western states, declaring that Israel's conduct is unlawful under international law. It's quite significant. Definitely will have an impact on mobilizing other nations to follow suit. And as the Deputy Foreign Minister said, there's a huge multilateral summit in June where the two-state solution and Palestinian statehood will be discussed, and it's part of an effort by Norway and some of its allies to basically diversify their efforts, whether on the legal fronts or the political or diplomatic fronts, to try to resolve the dire humanitarian crisis. But all eyes are on Gaza right now. This case is not detached from the situation on the ground. We've heard from almost all delegations an emphasis on the looming famine and the continued starvation of Gaza civilians, with nearly 2 months of a complete blockade and denial of the entry of humanitarian aid. So this legal action is quite significant in terms of pronouncing the illegality of what's going on right now, but also it's reflective of a growing global consensus on the illegality of Israel's conduct in Gaza and occupied Palestine.
Sundus Aam, outside of the International Court of Justice, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Now, tomorrow will be the final day of hearings at the ICJ, and you can keep up to date by following Sundus Aam's reporting on our website, middleeasteye.net. And stay tuned as we turn now to heightening tensions between India and Pakistan in the aftermath of a deadly attack in the contested region of Kashmir.
24 hours ago, Pakistan announced it had credible intelligence India would launch a military strike within the next 24 to 46 hours. For today's Spotlight, we ask, are India and Pakistan headed for war? This impending warning by Pakistan's Information Minister Ataullah Tarar followed India's accusations that Islamabad supported Saturday's deadly Pahalgam attack in Kashmir. It was the deadliest civilian attack in decades. 25 tourists and 1 local were brutally gunned down. At first, a group called the Resistance Front claimed responsibility for the attack. Later, they revoked their claim. Islamabad has rejected any link and held up the Indian government's unevidenced claims as proof they are seeking false pretext to launch airstrikes. Now, bullets have flown, visas have been revoked, families separated, and also the life-saving supply of tens of billions of cubic meters of water has been threatened. Both sides are outwardly positioning their forces for war. But it is not the first flare-up in the fraught modern history between the neighbouring nuclear nations. Ever since India and Pakistan were partitioned in 1947, the mountainous Kashmir region has been disputed, and 3 major wars have been fought there, though the last one was over 50 years ago. But armed skirmishes are not infrequent. They even led to airstrikes in 2019, when all-out war was narrowly avoided with the help of US and Arab mediation. There is some historic validation to India's accusations that Pakistan has previously supported insurgents in the region, but there is also plenty of cause for homegrown Kashmiri resistance and radicalization without any need for Pakistani support. Crucial wider context here is the inflammatory far-right politics of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who uses anti-Pakistan and Islamophobic sentiment as an electoral rallying cry, and who, in 2019, revoked Kashmir's semi-autonomous status, bringing the region under state control, jailing Kashmiri leaders, and putting its people under curfew. So, where does that leave us? We are seeing some pretty terrifying language from both governments. But as stated, it is not for the first time. Throughout its disputed history, the Kashmir region has seen everything from cross-border gunfire to diplomatic, hostile positioning. With the revoking of visas by each government, we are not just seeing, travel restrictions. We are seeing families being separated, torn apart, people who are living in Kashmir, working in Kashmir without particular nationalities having to leave, and sometimes leave behind children and parents.
And Matilda, I have a question before we are joined by our guest. This latest round of tensions, how did it begin?
So, this really, in theory, dates back to Saturday, the area of Pahalgam in Kashmir. This is an area that India has been framing as a stable region, one that it has got firm control of since it revoked Kashmir's autonomy in 2019 and imposed centralized control. So in theory, it's this attack in Pahalgam that has really, really threatened the Indian narrative of stability in the region. And not just that, but it's been devastating for people who have seen innocent tourists killed. But of course, there's much more to the story there, because while these tourists may be innocent, the area which they are visiting is a conflicted site. It is not a stable region. It is a contested region, and a region where people have seen significant suffering and what they would frame as foreign repression. Anyway, I think we can find out a little bit more now because we have our guest on the line. Joining us from within Kashmir is an Indian Kashmiri journalist, analyst, and peace activist. Welcome to Middle East Eye Live, Zafar Chowder.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Can you give us any updates about how tense the situation feels in Kashmir right now, or how real the threat of war is?
So it's very complex to understand, whereas it's almost 10 days after the terrorist attack at the hill resort in Kashmir. So the Kashmir Valley is bouncing back to normalcy. The tourists are coming back in thousands once again, and they want to send this message to terrorists that we don't want to get defeated and we want to visit Kashmir again. But at the same time, there is tension between India and Pakistan. So people are holding breath, and there are speculations that it's not going to die down as such. So there is going to be some kind of retaliation. So what retaliation, at what time? So no one knows about that. So there is a situation of tension. There is a situation of speculation that's going on at the moment.
And it's not just speculation about what is coming, but speculation about what happened. The immediate root of this tension is, of course, the vicious attack in Pahalgam on Saturday. We've seen competing claims about who's responsible. India's blamed Pakistan's government directly. Pakistan has firmly denied this, but not just them. Now the militant group that originally claimed responsibility has taken back on its admission. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Is there any consensus within Kashmir about what actually happened?
So the history of recent conflict in Kashmir has been going on for around 35 years. So I'm afraid there are no evidences from the past for different parties to come across a consensus after every major incident. So Indian government is very firm in its belief, in its opinion, and on the basis of some preliminary investigation that Pakistani state is involved, terrorist organizations which are operating from the soil of Pakistan which are involved. And Pakistan, as you have already said, has vehemently denied its involvement in any manner. So that's where we are. So it's been 10 days. So there are no success as we speak in hunting down the terrorists so far. So Home Minister of India spoke this evening, and he said that we are making all-out efforts to hunt down the terrorists. So unless a terrorist is captured or some communication channels are exposed, it's difficult to find out who exactly pulled the trigger. But yes, Indian agencies strongly believe that Pakistan is behind the attack.
Now, today we are asking whether all-out war is likely. And on that, you wrote something really stark on X. You wrote, "Never in my life have I seen or heard of any people in history being so desperate for a war." I wondered, who do you see as having this appetite for war, and why?
So India has suffered in Kashmir a number of terrorist attacks. So in the recent, there is a strong political leadership at the central government in India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And Modi's promise was that once he becomes Prime Minister, he will end terrorism for once and all. That was in 2014. Now it's been 15 years, it's been 11 years. And in these 11 years, a number of high-profile incidents of terrorism have happened. So he has conducted 2 surgical strikes, which means that he has crossed the line of control or crossed the border to set a new deterrence to go inside Pakistan and attack the alleged terror bases there. And then incidents of terrorism have happened again. After this incident, in which 26 tourists lost their lives, so a vast majority across India is asking for a decisive attack on Pakistan. So people are asking, people are baying for blood, people are asking for attack. If you look at the Pakistani side, they say bring it on. So that's a matter of national pride, and that's how things have been between the two countries. So I see that India and Pakistan have been one at one point, and now they are divided by border. And the overwhelming majority of people on both sides is asking for war to happen sometime soon.
But what about the people in Kashmir who would have to deal with the brunt of that war? Many people there,
Absolutely.
What are they saying?
I think that's a very, very important question. Someone needs to go to Kashmir, come to us and ask us that what is it that we want. So there is a broader consensus across Kashmir Valley, because Kashmir Valley is also divided across different social spectrums. There are Hindu people, there are Muslim people, there are people divided across political ideologies. So they want terrorism to end. They want the terrorist act that took place on 22nd of April to be avenged. But no one in Jammu and Kashmir wants war, because we have seen very closely that what does it mean. And once you initiate war, it's not in anyone's hand to bring that to an end. So people are very, very cautious in Kashmir.
But I'm wondering then, if there's nothing to gain for the people of Kashmir, who is there something to gain for? In Kashmir, it's pretty clear that, India has intentions for administrating Kashmir, that they have actively imposed their administration. By contrast, the Pakistani government says that it's only interested in defending the autonomy and the sovereignty of Kashmiris. Starting with the Pakistani government, how sincere does this feel? Do you buy it?
How sincere? Sorry, I didn't get this question.
I was asking about the Pakistani government's position formally on Kashmir, that their only interests in the region are in defending the autonomy and the sovereignty of Kashmiris against Indian administration. Does that pledge feel sincere?
So this political conflict has been going on for a while. And there has been a status quo, and that was a point of discomfort for almost everyone for more than 7 decades. In 2019, when India brought down the last semblance of autonomy that Kashmir had, and it downgraded it to a union territory that is directly administered by the center, so that has changed the dynamics of the situation. So there is some kind of discussion that people want to reopen in the territory which is held by Pakistan, that is divided into two parts. So that status quo that has persisted before 2019 is being aggressively challenged. People want the situation to change. People want some open conversations to happen. People want some honest discussions to take place. So sincerity in terms of the political positions which have been held by authorities, particularly Pakistani authorities, since 1947 onwards, is now critically challenged. People want that situation to change.
I suppose there's also the cynical possibility, or the cynical interpretation, that Pakistan's current government often seems to have quite a fragile hold on power. They came in on the back of inconclusive elections. They've faced massive protests over the imprisonment of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Is there a chance that they could see, warmongering rhetoric as an opportunity to improve their popularity at home?
So, in a certain way, that this warmongering suits both sides, in a certain way that, a strong leadership on the Indian side, which has always said that there can't be any incident of terrorism under our watch. So they are under intense public pressure to do something. On the Pakistani side, the problem is far more serious. There are problems of their economy. There are problems of their social structures. And the military, which has always been very powerful there, has in the recent months or years have been very seriously challenged. Its authority has been very seriously challenged. So if there is a conflict with India, escalation in conflict with India, that is a potential factor for the people to rally behind the military, and for the military and the current government to emerge very strongly. So which is why I think Pakistan also wants that, something should happen so that they are able to retaliate and they are able to firm their hold on the power they're holding there.
And something that, you've indicated and that we've heard a lot of is that, Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister's rhetoric about actions in Kashmir, it really revolves around the language of terrorism, of clamping down on terrorism. But some of his policies sort of have been seen as much more far-reaching. It's not just the revoking of constitutional rights, but the laws being introduced are described as some as sort of engineering a demographic shift in the Muslim majority region. Do Modi's policies in Kashmir feel like the actions of a man who's just trying to, introduce peace against terror?
So that's a very strong political argument in Kashmir. The Kashmiri people have always been very sensitive about anyone from anywhere else in the country from within India coming and settling in Kashmir. So since this constitutional relationship was changed, so in a way that system was open for people from other parts of India to come and settle down in Kashmir, but then there are certain regulations that those who have stayed here for more than 15 years. So the anxieties as being made out. For example, when this terrorist incident happened on 22nd of April, so a statement was issued by the terrorist organization that since there is a demographic change going on in Kashmir, which is why we did this attack. Even as later on they have withdrawn that statement. But at the people's level in Kashmir, the anxieties are not as much that someone would want a violent incident to happen to give this message to Narendra Modi that we don't accept the change in demography. So it's not something really very, very visible. Though there are laws, there are regulations, but it's not something that concerns people on an everyday basis.
Okay. And finally, if, war unfortunately was to break out in Kashmir, it wouldn't be the first time. 3 previous wars have failed to resolve this dispute, but they have seen millions displaced and tens of thousands killed. If war was to break out, is it a war that anyone could win?
So I don't think that this is, if there is a war between India and Pakistan, that is going to be won by any party. So there have been wars mainly around Kashmir in 1947, in 1965, in 71, that was a different thing. That was about Bangladesh, but Kashmir was at its center. And there's a limited war in 1999 in the Kargil Heights. None of these events of war have changed the status of Kashmir between India and Pakistan. So I think eventually dialogue, cooperation, addressing the core issues with sincerity, I think that's what is going to resolve Kashmir issue. That's going to, bring peace in the region. So I don't think any saner voice, any saner mind anywhere in India or Pakistan thinks that, war is going to bring a solution. So I understand that, people are deeply emotional at the moment, that there were some tourists who were there at the hill station to enjoy for merrymaking, and they were killed there. They were asked about their religion. So people are deeply, deeply angry. So once this cool down, people will realize that, and I think people have already started talking about this, that war is not going to be something to resolve anything.
Zafar Chowder, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure.
Stay up to date by following our reporting at MiddleEastEye.net.
And that's all the time that we have for you today. But before we lose you, we really want to hear from you.
Please do send in your thoughts. Our handle on social media is at MiddleEastEye, and you can email us MEELive@MiddleEastEye.net.
We are right here every Tuesday and Thursday, 5 p.m. London time, 12 p.m. New York time.
See you then. 5 o'clock. Oh my God, thank you for asking the question. I find it so much easier.